Okay, first of all, I want to apologize if I'm a little low energy today. I was overserved on a boat last night. I was not informed that there would be alcohol at this conference, so you'll be hearing from my lawyers. I like to think that Red Monk selected my talk for its title as well. Today I'm going to be talking to you about acid rock drainage and the direct and indirect toxicity within the Bonita Peak Mining District, which is a Superfund site near Silverton, Colorado. And my name is Andrew Todd. I'm an ecotoxicologist with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So first, a little bit on who I am. Academically, I got my master's and PhD in engineering from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and my bachelor's in biology from Williams College. I also have a degree in mixology from the Bartending College of America. And I'll have you know that's the only degree that's up on my wall at the EPA. Professionally, I've been the EPA's Water Quality Section Chief for a 6-state region, which includes Colorado and the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, as well as 27 tribes. Prior to that, I was an ecotoxicologist for the EPA CERCLA program, which is Superfund, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Before that, I was a research biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, was chair of the Colorado Water Quality Control Commission. I was appointed by the governor, 3 governors, for that position, which I served for 10 years in. And before that, I was a contaminants biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at Rocky Flats, where they make plutonium triggers, as well as the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where they made various chemical weapons. Just to prove I'm a legit scientist, this is a list of recent relevant scientific publications. We can talk at lunch about any of these. So, a quick introduction on what acid rock drainage is. It's what happens when rocks containing sulfidic minerals are exposed through mining and contact water and oxygen. The resultant chemical reactions create acidic conditions that mobilize metals from neighboring rocks. And I was glad to see in an earlier talk ecosystems. We're going to talk about ecosystems today, but real ecosystems. The ecological impacts from this acid rock drainage can result from increased metal concentrations, a decreased pH, and metal oxide deposition, which is what you're seeing in that photo there. The stream on the left is iron oxide coming in. That's a clean stream on the right. And where they come together, it's precipitating out aluminum, which is the white, and is also referred to as white death. Wait, what's going on here? So in the immortal words of Tyler Durden, you are not your job. And I'm not really talking about science today. I'm here for a different reason. So you can breathe easy now, because that was going to be a real boring talk. I've given it before. You don't want it. So why am I actually here? As I mentioned, I went to Williams College. Someone else we know went to Williams College. That's a young Steve O'Grady. And while we're smiling in this picture, our start was not as smiley as this. I went to a party where Steve was curled around a handle of tequila, and he looked me in the eye and he said, and I'm glad we got F-bombs out of the way early in the last talk, he said, if you're not going to pay, get the fuck out. That's how we met. But we went on to become the world's greatest beer pong duo. Beer pong involving paddles. I'm sure some of you are beer pong where you throw it. That's not beer pong. That's Beirut. We stayed friends after college. This is at my parents' place in Grand Lake. I'm not sure, can you tell what kind of beer you're drinking there, Steve? I think it's a Bud Light, maybe? This is on a beach in the Cayman Islands, I believe. This is at my wedding. Steve is a handsome guy, isn't he? And this is at Steve's wedding a couple years later. And this is a more recent photo of how we've weathered together. The one good thing I've gotten from Steve is a love of Pearl Jam. And so this is from 2018 in Missoula. Right? It was in Missoula. My family and I drove up to meet Steve. You were at some sort of tech conference that had a Pearl Jam concert thrown on. So in trying to figure out what I was going to talk about when Steve invited me, I went to the Monktoberfest frequently asked questions site to figure out A, what is Monktoberfest, and B, what should I talk about? And I came across this. Is this another damn social media conference? Negative. The Monktoberfest exists to examine the intersection of social trends and technology, blah, 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 blah. So what I did was realize that if I replaced a few words in that blurb from the frequently asked questions section, it was relevant for me. So, is this another damned trail race? Negative. Running Rivers, which is a nonprofit that I started, and the Flyathlon, which we're going to talk about today, exists to examine the intersection of recreation and conservation, sometimes in a humorous fashion, other times the science may be sobering. What we want to do in simple terms is to get outdoor enthusiasts to take a step back, to look at the natural world around them, and assume an active role in its protection. So why did I start this nonprofit? As you might imagine, and seeing the list of publications, being a career federal bureaucrat has its benefits, but also its significant frustrations and limitations. And it turns out I have interests and passions beyond my career. And 3 of them are depicted here. I'm a trail runner, I'm a fly fisherman, and I like craft beer, not Bud Light, Steve. And I noticed that in Colorado and around the West, you have this outdoor industry that's making billions of dollars. And this is a quote from Luis Benitez, who is the head of the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office. And he said, the outdoor industry is worth billions of dollars, and I think we can and should take care of our own backyard. And as an outdoor enthusiast myself, I feel the same. If we want these places to remain, we need to step up and advocate for their protection. So I created Running Rivers, and you can see this is my license plate, so I'm all in. What is our mission? Our mission is to conserve and restore native fish populations and freshwater ecosystems by inspiring people to engage in conservation through recreation, education, and on-the-ground projects. Our approach is our slogan, which is conservation through recreation. And this is the start of one of our Flyathlon races. You can see, and I'll describe it in more detail, but they're running with fly rods on their backpack, or in their backpack. So what is a Flyathlon? Making fun of the triathlon, our motto is run, fish, beer instead of swim, bike, run. And you can see with the beer there, that's how we start each race. We sacrifice a shitty domestic beer or two. It started with me with a 357 trying to shoot a beer, and I missed and scared everyone in the process, and now my daughters shoot it with BB rifles, so much safer, but still effective, as you can see from, I think that's a chelada, like a Bud Light chelada that got shot there. So what are the rules? You have to complete the course, which depends on the water body. If it's a lake that's 5 miles up, it's a 10-mile course. You're not going to see any 13.1 stickers on my car. You have to complete the course, and at some point, you have to stop and catch a fish. And both of the races in Colorado and the one race we have in Iowa, the whole trail is near the river the whole time. So you have to break off at some point, stop, and catch a fish. And then your time is adjusted by the size and species of the fish. And there are lots of prizes if you win. You can win for being the fastest male, fastest female, biggest fish, smallest fish. There's all sorts of ways to win. But we use this as a fundraiser, so it's a lot of fun to get out in the woods with your friends and party, but we really wanted to use this to, like Luis Benitez said, be part of the solution in the preservation of these places that we love. So we raise funds with this event, and we do that through an incentivized crowdfunding model. We get a bunch of stuff donated from our sponsors, which I'll show you in a minute, and then we incentivize people to crowdfund with their peers and family, and then they can win prizes if they raise the most money or in drawings and that sort of thing. So that's our fundraising model. But the other big piece is about building community. We try to be inclusive of all abilities. We've got new trail runners, we've got new fly fishermen that show up every year, and those two things, as well as craft beer, as you all know, can be a little douchey if in the wrong environments. And so what we're trying to do is make them accessible so people aren't intimidated to learn to fly fish or to start trail running for the first time. And then I would say the best element of these events is we hold them in remote, offline festival atmospheres. So it's really intended to get people off their devices, get people out in the woods around a campfire, and you'd be surprised at the conversations that result and the relationships that develop. This is one of the first Middle Creek Flyathlons. We cap these at about 60 people, so we're minimizing our impact on the resource. And that's all, if it were any bigger than that, that would be a lot of people to keep track of. So 60 is a good number. We've held these races this was the 8th summer in the Middle Creek watershed, which is in south central Colorado. We've held one in the Lake Fork, which is in southwestern Colorado. We have a race in Iowa. I didn't know there were trout in Iowa, but it turns out there are, and we've held that race for 5 years. We held a kids flyathlon 1 year, and then during COVID, we had the socially distanced, not that COVID's gone. My dad is an infectious disease specialist, so it's not gone, but we had, during the 2020, we had a socially distanced event that also raised money. And then we've had interest from all these other places for developing new events. But as I mentioned, this is extracurricular, so I need help in putting on these new races if anyone's interested. So who on earth would be interested in such an event? It turns out our demographic is pretty broad. We've had people participate as young as 13 and as old as 75. This is kind of just a collage of people that participated that 1 year. As I mentioned, we have people who are new to trail running, new to fly fishing, and so it's kind of all over the map who shows up for these things. In terms of sponsorship, we've got a wide range of distilleries, breweries, outdoor gear manufacturers, all over the map. National Geographic was a sponsor this year, which was kind of cool. We gave out maps of the area that we were holding the event in, and they're real interested in working with us moving forward. In terms of some of the press that we've received, we've been in Outside Magazine, we've been on Patagonia's website, a great podcast called The Dirtbag Diaries. If you haven't listened to that, it's worth a listen. But all of those, it turns out when you do something extremely novel and kind of dumb, people want to write about it. So we've been in all these publications, and we were called Colorado's coolest new triathlon, which I thought was pretty cool. Outside of the events, we've got a lot of interest, and so we have to feed the beast. So we have developed, particularly this year, some non-event engagement strategies. We have what's called the Trout Man and associated longer distances, the old trout with umlauts, because who doesn't love a couple good umlauts? Lucifish, which is 66.6 miles, 6 different fish species, and a 16.66 or greater % beer. So you have to do all those things to earn. That's the Trout Man belt buckle there. We're working on, because as you might imagine, there aren't a lot of people that have completed old trout or lucifish, but we're thinking like a sheriff's badge for that. And then Finsanity has never been attempted, but I think it's going to occur within the next couple years. I've got one guy who's crazy, and I've made all these additional ones because he's crazy. And you got to feed the beast. Fish slapping is when, as you see at the bottom photo there, it's when you run someone else's race and you stop at some point and catch a fish during their race and take a picture of said fish on their race bib. And then the final one is we call the fastest known fish. There's a trend in the ultra running community that it's basically the fastest known time, where you record how quickly it takes you to get to that top of that mountain and back. And there's a website that has all that documented. And so we thought it would be more fun if we added fishing and beer to it. And so we created fastest known fish, which is essentially fastest known time plus fish and beer. Another program that we created, we call the Rare Fish, Rare Beer Project. And in this program, we're working with breweries and distilleries to make beers and whiskey. We made a whiskey that raises awareness and money for the fish that are within the watershed of the brewery or distillery. This is, volume 1 was Trucha Grande, which is raised money for the Rio Grande cutthroat trout. Bring the Greenback, which is the greenback cutthroat trout, is Colorado state fish. And this is a Denver brewery because that's the watershed that they're native to. We made a whiskey called Nativa with Law's Whiskey House, and that raised about $10,000 for projects. We made a beer in Iowa called Flyathlon, which is a scientific name for brook trout. We made a beer in the Colorado River drainage called the Colorado Cuddy, raised money for the Colorado River cutthroat trout. And then because we love the Rio Grande cutthroat trout so much, we made a second beer called Trucha 2. At the end of the day, we're really committed. The whole point of this is to advance conservation. 80% or greater, we're all volunteer at this point, so that 20% is going to pay for insurance, among other things. But we're putting 80% back into on-the-ground projects. In terms of the type of work we're funding, our impact over the last 8 years, we've raised over $500,000 now for projects. And this money is the perfect cash match for grants. So when a state agency is looking to do a native trout reclamation project, they oftentimes will go for federal money and they need a cash match, and we can just write them a check. So we can leverage our money that we've raised in a significant manner. So these are some of the recent projects. We partnered with the National Park Service and Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Trout Unlimited on a major watershed reclamation for the Rio Grande cutthroat trout in the sand dunes. It's in the northern drainage of the sand dunes. That's through phase 1, and when we're done, that will be the largest stronghold of Rio Grande cutthroat trout in Colorado. And a couple other projects here that if anyone's interested at lunch, I'm happy to talk to you about them. The bottom one is a project in Iowa that we've funded with the funds raised during that race. What's our vision for the future? Our goal is to expand these existing programs into new regions, establish new programs to increase our impact, and then develop our internal capacity to do more. As I mentioned, I work for the EPA. All this takes a lot of time, and I also have a family that it suffers to some degree when I work on this instead of hanging out with them. So I'm looking to, in the coming years, to try to hire an executive director to do all that work instead of me doing it in addition to my job. So why am I talking about this? Again, back to Tyler Durden. You're not your job. I mean, your job is an important part of who you are, but there's all sorts of ways to make an impact outside of what you do professionally. A lot of hours in the week, work shouldn't take up all of them. World needs creative ideas that are fun right now. And if a race pairing, trail running, fly fishing, and craft beer can make this kind of an impact, then so can whatever idea you guys have. And Steve asked me to push y'all to do something spectacular. So that's it in a nutshell. And I really like fishing. And as a former employee of Trout Unlimited, you've always got to end with gratuitous fish porn. So here you go.